Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello, friends. Happy Monday. Welcome back to another episode of the What Fulfills You podcast. My name is Emily Elizabeth. I'm your host every week at all times, and welcome if this is your first time tuning in to the show. For those of you who are new, a very quick gist about the podcast. On What Fulfills You, I talk either on solo episodes or with lovely guests around the art of creating a fulfilling life. And this to me became important when I went through one of those breakups in college that really struck a chord in me to recognize what is more important in life. And it was actually at a time too, once I started to pick up and build back Emily as a person, I started to work on the trajectory of my career, what it could look like post-grad. At the time, I had my first business, Elite Skatewear. I'm going to dive into that today, actually, a little bit. And I noticed that I was doing really well. I was only 20, probably turning 21 that year, and getting more successful, so to speak, at least on a financial place, for that age. And I realized that was moving forward. It was progressing. Yet I still felt unhappy. I still felt a bit empty. And it had me thinking, well, then what is it? Why am I feeling this way? Why did I feel a bit lonely? Whatever. Realized that I didn't have the right relationships and connections in my life. And that led me down a hole of looking into what makes a person fulfilled in life. And I found the word fulfill and fulfillment and fulfilling through probably, I think, Tony Robbins when he was relaying that to long-term happiness. Long-term happiness is just being fulfilled, right? Your cup is full. On the flip side, over a year ago now, I remember it was the same thing. Same experience, was going through a breakup or had been through a breakup. And I think that one definitely, similarly played a big toll on me mentally and emotionally. And at the time too, I was actually once again having more success in my career and my agency and was gaining a lot of new clients. And I remember telling my psychologist at the time, I was like, I'm getting all this new business, and when it happens, I'm not celebrating the way I used to. And then I shared with him, I feel like I'm doing that because, or not feeling as excited because I feel a sense of emptiness. And, it was because I was still grieving from losing a partner and someone that I felt like was my best friend. If you've been in a relationship or are in one, you probably can resonate with that a little bit. So all that to say, I've been through various experiences of life to know, okay, when I had this but didn't have this, how did I feel? And vice versa. And of course, you, I think, ideally need a little bit of all buckets filled in a way. But the most important for sure that is going to be the most impactful are your relationships and the way they make you feel connected to yourself, connected to others, connected to the world, to the community. I think that's the most important aspect as a human, is that we all need bits of connection. So that's on What Fulfills You. And for today's episode, I'm actually going to slightly wing it in a way. I only have the topic written down, and I wanted to share it from honest thoughts, from the heart. I personally don't love scripting solo episodes, and I find that I'm more relaxed and open when I don't have too many things jotted down on what I'm going to talk about. As you can probably tell from the episode title, I'm going to be diving into my journey on, I guess, from some listeners, what they wanted to know is my journey on becoming quote unquote successful, and at least how I got to where I am today. And it's been a while since I've done one of these episodes. I think probably the last time was 2020 or 2021, and a lot has evolved since then. And this is also probably insightful for those of you who are newer to the show, maybe discovered the podcast through a guest that was on the show and reshared the podcast. So those of you, actually, funny enough, some of you guys expressed loving the one of the recent episodes with Liv Schreiber, where she talked about her journey in becoming an entrepreneur and now creating Hot and Social and everything. And so I feel like some of you guys shared that feedback with me in wanting to hear that on my side as well. So I'm going to start right back to my teenage years. And as I alluded to earlier, I had my very first business, Elite Skatewear, when I was around 17 years old. And for those of you who really don't know much about me, I was a former competitive figure skater. I did this sport for about 12 to 13 years. And I was a stubborn teenager that wanted to do things her way. And what I mean by that is when I was 16 or 17, I started, probably maybe even earlier, but I started irking for designing my own dresses, or like more or less like Pinterest board and Emily putting all these ideas together. Like, I like this neckline, and I like this like glove attachment, and I like that color, and I like this skirt cut, and like I want it all mashed up in one dress. Can we do it? That was me as a teenager. And fast forward, ended up creating a small business out of it because people over time would ask me where I got the dress, and I was shy at first, but I didn't know how to say like I did it. Like, I mean, like I didn't make it, right? I had a manufacturer do it, but I crafted the concept of the dress, and like there it is. Like, I gave them my measurements and we made it. And at the time, e-commerce was starting and getting big, and eBay was a big thing. For those of you who are at least 26 years old, you probably remember eBay, at least freshly, more so maybe than those of you who are a little bit younger. But eBay allowed me to easily have a platform to sell custom skating dresses. It was pretty easy, right? Like, it's self-explanatory. You create an account, you start selling, and that was the era for eBay. And I made decent money. I sold these dresses for, I think at the time, somewhere around $200 per dress. Now, with, inflation and everything, the prices are different, but that was what I was doing as a 17-year-old, okay? And at the same time, I was already getting experience with answering emails and customer service and invoicing. I used PayPal at the time. I didn't even graduate high school yet. But remember, this is a small business. I wasn't, doing this full time, but I was probably selling like, 5 to 10 dresses a month. Give or take. It really depends on the season, right? But I wanted to get into this because I've been an entrepreneur at heart my whole life, and skating was the best place for me to start. And also the market is really niche, so it requires a lot of insider info to know how to get to the market, access the market. And honestly, I'm pretty sure all skating brands are very much started by former figure skaters or parents of figure skaters. So that's what I started, 17 years old. Fast forward, I'm in college, going through the breakup, as I said earlier, and I decided to put a bigger focus on getting this brand and business more up to speed. One of the things that I made a mistake on, I guess, early on in my career, business, whatever, entrepreneurship life, was waiting for a family member to help me build a website for the business. And it was like, when I say wait, I'm talking years. Okay. Number one piece of I hate giving quote unquote advice. I don't like to tell people unsolicited advice. But one thing I would share is, if you are ever coming across an idea or something you want to do, for the love of God, do not wait for someone to help you jumpstart it, okay? I remember I was obviously emotionally struggling with this breakup. I needed something to focus on. My ex at the time also said to me when we broke up, he's like, find something about you to focus on again. He's like, maybe go back to skating, maybe go do something that helps you focus on you. Obviously took that to heart and really put some dedicated time into the business when I was a sophomore going into junior year of college. And so I made my own website. I decided to look into it and used Squarespace, used the templates, made my own branding colors. Like, I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that I had nothing else to do. And I was really determined. I just wanted to get myself back up on my feet. And I saw how excited I felt about the progress of creating this website and getting this brand more up to speed with the skating world. So, made the website, and then I realized that another approach I wanted to do to expand the business is to get into retail stores. It was something that I've dabbled with before and had slight experience with, but I wanted to do it at bigger scale. So believe it or not, I took in-stock dresses that I had and literally walked into what we call pro shops at the skating rinks. This is where they sell like hockey and skating gear if you've ever been to an ice rink. Especially like the big facilities. Southern California, which is where I lived at the time, has a lot of big facilities because a lot of Team USA skaters actually train out there. Fun fact, if you did not know that, a lot of the Olympic and world level skaters train out in Southern California, and that's even with skaters from other countries. They're training there. So the pro shops are very big. And of course, any up and coming skater that's like 12, 13, 14 years old who are still newer to, buying custom dresses, which by the way, a lot of custom dresses usually, especially from high-end designers, they cost, upwards of $500, $600, some of them $1,000. So getting a ready to wear like competition dress that you can buy in a pro shop for $250 or whatever the price was at the time is a really great price, and you get to see the quality in person, right? So I brought it in to a pro shop. I think I called prior, if I remember correctly, it was like summer 2018 or 2017. I called and asked when the owner would be around. And I remember one of the employees told me, oh, she'll be here on Saturday. I'm like, okay, great. I prepared to bring my dresses to that store. I had no plan, by the way. I don't even know how, like, looking back, I was 21 years old. So I must have had a lot of conviction or something, but I stormed in there and I was like, hi, I'm looking to speak with so-and-so. I already knew her name. And they're like, oh, there she is. I'm like, hi, just brought these dresses. And she's like staring at them because they're glittery. They have all crystals on it. So she's like, what are these, right? Like, basically like pitch her on the spot. And I'm just like, telling her, hey, I own this brand. I think they would do great in your store. I think they would do great for the skaters in this community. I would love to connect with you to talk further about potentially partnering and working together, right? And I think, within that summer, she placed an order for her first order, which I think she either did 12 or 24 dresses, okay? So remember, keep in mind, I'm like 21, I think, at the time. And that's kind of my first, I would personally say, my first entrepreneurial success. I feel like making the website and then kind of redesigning and making this brand more modern, and then pushing it forward by trying to get into stores because I was so used to selling direct to consumer, which is great, right? But I wanted to use retail as a mix of, okay, increasing sales, right? The margins are going to be smaller because it's wholesale price, but increasing sales as well as a little bit of marketing because people are going to see the brand and where this dress is from. And if the style is not in their size, they can now at least order the dress through me. And now they have a reference point, right? They saw the dress. And that's actually what happened. Over the next few years, people saw my dress, my brand in this store, and she had more than one store. So she actually ordered for 2 different stores. And that really helped expand the business. And again, wasn't working full time yet. So this allowed me to learn the ropes of making, a couple $1,000s at once and learning how to invest that back into the business, back into the brand. And of course, I was in college, so I didn't have too much to spend on yet. But that for me was the foundation. And I think the big lesson there is, number one, taking the opportunity before I was ready and before I knew anything, right? The website and also the wholesale pricing. I had no idea how wholesale pricing worked. But again, I learned as I went. And I'll be honest, I got very lucky to be able to learn that at the age of 21 versus maybe 25, because I once again did the same thing for my card game and the What Fulfills You journal. So those 2 pieces of merch are more sellable in retail stores. And I knew by that point the difference between wholesale pricing and retail pricing because of this experience. Okay, so let's fast forward to senior year of college. And this is also, I would say, the pivoting point for, I guess, the trajectory of my career after college. I decided to do a remote internship, which is something I was very interested at the time too, because I was already keen on being able to work from anywhere. And I got lucky and I found an internship for a boutique marketing agency. I think at the time they only had a total of 4 people, and then plus me as an intern. I believe that's the case. And what I got to do was social media and I think a lot of influencer partnerships. I handled a lot of that, which was great because I already had experience as a creator at the time. And it was great insight for me. I think learning from that side, which is learning what it's like to work with an agency and at an agency. I ended up working at this agency for 9 or 10 months. I basically extended it through my entire school year. First semester, I did it for school credit because that was required for my major. Strategic and corporate communication was what I studied at Chapman University. And the second semester, I did it for an hourly pay. So I think I worked about 12 hours a week for this agency. Now, interestingly, after the internship, I realized that I might not be as interested in digital marketing as much as I thought I would be. Now, obviously, we'll catch up because I ended up starting my own agency. But I think what I realized is that it wasn't fast-paced enough for me in the sense of stimulation and a little bit the highs and lows that I kind of love about entrepreneurship. Again, you hate it sometimes and you love it sometimes. But I think there's a beauty to that driving me. And I didn't feel that same energy working at this agency. And so that's actually why once I got an offer or was recruited to work in sales, I thought about it and was like, oh, I think this actually could be a great fit. And once I shadowed someone else at the company, I realized like, oh, okay, this actually is a good fit for me. That was kind of like senior year and then post-grad working in sales. Now, as most of you guys probably know, especially those of you who know about my background, I have my own creative marketing agency where I handle full-on social media strategy, content creation, influencer partnerships, everything in that realm. And I work with primarily service-based clients. And the reason why I started this was mainly, I think, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I heard from another girl from my very small hometown that she started a similar type of agency. And I remember when she shared that, I was like, wow, I have a little bit of FOMO, because if you're from my surrounding hometown area and you created this agency and you were able to quit your job and then do this, why can't I do it too? I think that's one of the best traits about me, is that I often always look at people and then think to myself, why not me as well? Versus, oh, that's so lucky, or wow, she's lucky. I have a habit of thinking, oh, why not me? Especially when we're from the same area, and I feel like, there's no reason why if you can do it, I can't either. I think the second reason, this is a very funny story too, but at the time I was kind of towards the end of, I guess you could say, talking or seeing a guy that I really, really liked at one point. This was back in 2020. And he inspired me in many ways. He, for one, was older. He was actually going to be fully candid with you guys. He was 15 years older. And I was younger, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of judgment from that, and I don't blame you, because I want to say that I have definitely not dated or, been in that realm with someone with that kind of age gap since then. But I will say it was an amazing, mature experience. I think being at that age at the time, I felt like it was hard to connect with men that were closer in age, that respected and appreciated me for who I am, because I was 23, and I would say that I matured very fast. So a lot of guys, let's say if they're 27 and were meeting me, they were not accustomed to kind of my mannerism. And I think for some of them that was off-putting. I think my entrepreneurial journey was also a little bit scary for some of them. Again, it really depends on the person, but a lot of people that I met, unless they were also more developed and had also reached some sort of milestone in their career, they were often a bit, maybe slightly insecure, you could say, about my quote unquote success or journey at that time so far. And so it was really refreshing to be able to have really deep and open conversations with someone that understood what I was doing, understood the framework, the mindset. And on top of that, I think because of his life experience and maturity, he understood and definitely appreciated me for being just an honest, genuine person. I think I was really looking for someone to accept me at face value, and this person probably more in touch with, I guess you could say, like his emotions and who he is, probably in part because of his background. I mentioned him before. He was, or probably is still, a cinematographer, was doing a lot of big shows and big movies, and so he was a great person that inspired me, I think, in an artistic way. I really combined arts and creativity once I met him, and he was actually the catalyst as to why I moved to LA, for those of you who never heard about me mentioning that before. So all that to say is relevant because I got into photography much more heavily because of this cinematographer guy that I was seeing, and yeah, it was crazy. I got into that, and I think I built up my skill in editing and photography and all of that, which has contributed to my agency, Loshattan, because I do that for some of my clients. Again, it depends on what they want and the deliverables they're looking for, but that's often something I do, and I really enjoy it. He also came into play because I remember, because he was so, for obvious reasons, being much older than me, he was successful in his own way. And when I say successful, he just had lived a lot already, right? And has done a lot of awesome shows, and I think was doing so well for himself. And I remember my first thought process, you guys, I was like, damn, if I would ever want to, end up with someone like this, I gotta catch up. This might make you guys laugh because that was actually my initial thought process. I'm like, I gotta catch up. Like, I am nowhere near, that. And obviously, I'm not saying this to be hard on myself. I was saying that from an inspirational place. I was like, damn, again, I know I'm only 23, but, I wanted to be not, I guess, that far off or behind from a partner. And there's an appreciation from men who are also developed and mature in that way, in the sense that they appreciate when a female is also doing her own thing and has, gone far enough in her journey. And I think that's actually something he really valued in me. And maybe it was also a cultural thing because he was German. So that probably plays a role. I think maybe in differences I've seen with American culture, some of the guys, I don't know if there was the same level of appreciation or admiration that I was doing that. But anyways, that's relevant because I'm sharing with you guys very candidly, I was inspired to move to LA, pick up like film photography more seriously, and also start an agency, all kind of in part because of this guy. And it wasn't like for bad reasons. It was actually for good reasons. I was inspired by him as a person. I wanted to catch up and do more with my life. I feel like he was doing so much with his life. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that too. And again, it's interesting because it's not like I picked up and did something similar to him. I was actually in a very different, field, if you will. But I picked up elements of the difference in how he approached life. He approached it with a creative eye, a little bit more spontaneity. And I was the one that was more maybe entrepreneurial and a little bit more rigid in some ways. And I loved that I was able to take that flair from him and bring it into my own life. And so started the agency for those primary reasons. And then, of course, what really propelled it and made it go off further and then helped me take off and do it full time was I got to a point, I think I started thinking about how I need to leave my corporate job. Like, I can't do this anymore. It's served a great chapter of my life, which was pretty much the first year out of college. But I remember by November 2020, this is Thanksgiving time. I remember my dad picked me up from New York. I was there in New York because flights were cheap. I was visiting a friend and just was taking advantage of, a little bit of, I guess you could call the slow end of COVID. And he picks me up from New York. We're on the drive back and I'm just spitting out all these ideas to him. I'm like, Dad, I'm going to start this agency. And I think this is what I'm going to name it. And this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to offer to clients. And this is going to be the price range. And that evening, not even 10 hours pass, I created the website, I created the logo, and I had my offerings right there. This is November 2020, Thanksgiving. I don't think I started to pick up traction until maybe like February or March 2021. And this was also around the time I was getting angsty. I was like, I need to leave my job, but I cannot leave until I at least have the same gross revenue coming in that's equivalent to what I'm making in my salary right now. So I did not leave my corporate job until the end of April. So that was April 2021. And I actually put a calendar date, like I put on my calendar in Google Calendar, I wrote down the day I was going to quit my job. I ended up leaving a week earlier, but I put it as an event on the calendar prior to it happening because I was more or less manifesting that this is going to happen, and I was already mentally preparing for that to be a fact. I was psychologically messing with myself, right? It worked though. I mean, I told a lot of my close friends, I'm like, hey, I'm leaving my job by this time. There were certain people in my life at the time that I was able to have a more business conversation with, and they put it to the test and they're like, hey, you know what? Put it on your calendar. If you don't leave by this date, you owe me $500. And when you put the money where your mouth is, you really start to shake. You go, oh, fuck, like, I got to get my shit together, right? And again, might not work for all of you, but I definitely would advise to test out what it feels like to have money involved and knowing that you might lose something if you don't do it, right? That often pushes people more. That certainly helped in my case. And April 2021 was when I started to move forward as a full-time entrepreneur and agency owner, and it was the best feeling. But I remember the first 2 to 3 months felt very off-putting and lonely because I was so used to connecting with my coworkers every day on WebEx meetings and different group meetings and whatever, and even phone calls to check in on each other. So the transition period from full-time job where I'm connecting with my sales team and my awesome coworkers every day to being an entrepreneur and working by yourself and not really having anyone to talk to was definitely lonely. And I share that because it's important to not over glamorize leaving the full-time job and being an entrepreneur, and also maybe, dropping out of college. Look, to be honest, I think being in the entrepreneur world, I see and hear a lot of it all the time. So I hear it frequently in my own echo chamber. But I want to say that I'm not the biggest advocate for dropping out of college just to become an entrepreneur or leaving your full-time job and going all in on this. I think you got to figure out what path works best for you. I've always known this about myself since I was a teenager. I mean, I think the reason why I started the skating dress business alone is such a sign going into the future that I was going to be kind of difficult to work with in a corporate setting because I loved doing things on my own and loved doing it at my own pace and loved doing it in the way that I wanted to do it. And that's obviously very difficult in big group settings. And I think the reason why I have always been that way, though, is because I've been a visionary all of my life. I had a vision to move to Southern California since I was 13. 5 years later, that comes into place, right, when I'm 18. So all of these things I was pretty aware about within myself, and I knew that it was going to come to fruition at some point in my adult life, and this is just how it came about. I became an entrepreneur, and again, if you hear the story about that agency and starting it, it was a few different micro moments that really got me there, right? Hearing it from a distant friend who is from my small hometown, feeling inspired by that, getting inspired by creativity through a guy that I was, kind of dating a little bit at the time, and then feeling the need to get out of my corporate job, and then feeling, all right, well, if you leave the corporate job, what are you going to do to make money, right? So I think all of those factors pushed me to be able to do those things. And I think if you pause and observe your life as you go and are able to pull similar things from the moments that I shared about my own life, you might see how that is going to steer you in a direction that is more made for you than the one that you're currently on. So then fast forward, 2 to 3 years, the agency is in full speed. And of course, the podcast didn't quite include in the story, but the podcast did start in March 2020. And I was simultaneously working on it while I was creating the agency. But I want to be fully transparent too. The reason why I started the agency simultaneously while maintaining this podcast is because it takes a lot of work and dedication and just time to get something like a podcast, a media platform, to grow to where you're earning full-time income, right? And I know there are podcasts out there that do make, I don't know, like 100 million a year, some are making at least $1 million a year, some are doing 500,000, and that's awesome, right? But I'm not at that point with this podcast. I want to put it out there. It is certainly a dream of mine. I love what I do. I love what I get to share with you guys. I have been recently connecting with a lot of you one-on-one, and you know who you are. It's been really awesome. And I want to preface, not all of you, but like definitely a select few of you guys, which has been really cool because some of you have been listening for 2, 3, 4 years now, which is insane because then that means some of these little nuggets of stories I've shared on this episode, you probably actually remember that I've shared this in the past before. So all that to say, right, I started this agency as well because I needed a way to stay afloat while also fulfilling my need and desire to work on my own and for myself. And the cost of that is you're going to grind a lot and you're going to have to work when you don't feel like it. And for me, that's okay. I love doing what I do. I've been able to connect with amazing clients that are also somewhat mentors and friends, and I learn from them in personal life aspects. Like, for example, I asked one of my clients not too long ago, I said to him, like, hey, can I ask you a personal question? He's like, of course. And I'm like, when you met his wife now, but I was telling him, like, when you first met her, did you know immediately that you were going to marry her, or did it take some time? And I've always been curious about this. He's someone that I admire. He's certainly successful in his career financially. And on top of that, he's a very grounded and kind man from what I've observed. And I've seen how he is with his partner, the way he like treats her in, public and when no one's looking. Like, I've observed, and I'm like, you seem like a great man and a great person. And so I felt like I was really curious to ask him that question, right? And I think it's awesome too when you get to work with people that you just respect and admire. He's probably, I don't even know his age, but I think like early 40s or something. And he tells me, he's like, almost immediately, meaning like he knew almost immediately that he was going to marry his now wife. And he shared, they did long distance, I think in the first year or first 6 months, I don't know. But he said, if not almost immediately, then at least it was definitely within the first 6 months. And I was like, that's interesting. So, just kind of wheeling it back to the small connections along the way. And he's referred one client to me already, although that person didn't become a client, but he's referred people. He's been a supporter of me as a person and as a entrepreneur. And so I really appreciate it. And, you might wonder, like, okay, how did I get the business up and going? Guys, like, it's not glamorous. I literally cold emailed for the longest time. I would pitch myself to businesses, like, all over. I would pitch. I would try to do anything to get business. And, especially when, it's like that was my main source of income, right? And so you're going to be hungry. When you're hungry, you're going to do whatever it takes. And I don't know if it's just my personality or a combination of growing up with immigrant parents and just seeing that at the forefront, but that is part of how I grew the business. It was not an overnight thing. One girl that has been working with me since Elite Skatewear, she's been there since the cold pitches. She even helped try to, recommend some businesses that she knew of in her city in California. And like, she's been there, but like before the agency even started, which is crazy. So, for those of you who are curious on how to create your own success in whatever way that looks like, whether that's in your career or life, or just to be able to start to pave your own path and direction, I hope you can hear from this episode that it comes from little things that add up over time. I've shared this quote before too, but it's one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs, and it's not exactly worded by him in this way, but I'm gonna butcher it. He said in the speech he gave to Stanford, I believe at the time, he said something along the lines of, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So whatever it is that you trust, karma, God, luck, whatever, you just got to trust that. And you'll be able to connect the dots looking backwards. And that for me is, I feel like, what I shared with you today. Like, I just connected the dots looking backwards. And, you know, for those of you who have been following for a while and maybe have always wondered, like, oh, I want to get to a place like that, or I wish I could be living a life like that. You can. You really can, you know? And I'm just an everyday girl. I came from a small hometown in Pennsylvania. And I think if you want my honest answer, the biggest difference perhaps between myself and my peers is simply conviction and execution. And mind you, I'm not even like top 1% of my age demographic, you know? And you know, that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that. And I certainly have a lot of room to grow and be better and do more things, especially in this podcast, that I would love to be able to cultivate, right? Like, this is a passion of mine. This is something that I have observed has become more needed for women like you guys listening, and, you know, for all of you who are listening, guy or girl. But you must go for it. You must go for it and stop waiting. I know I released an episode last week on this, but a lot of the things that I did, I just went for it. I didn't wait. I stopped waiting for someone to make a website for me. I stopped waiting for someone to come to me being interested in ordering my dresses. I stopped waiting for potential clients to come to me. I went hunting for them because I needed that, you know, reoccurring revenue. I needed my business to grow. I needed to be able to pay for my rent in LA and to be able to pay for the lifestyle, again, that wasn't really that bougie per se, but living in LA and New York comes at a cost, right? And you're right. If you're thinking, well, you don't have to live there. I don't have to live there. I grew up in a small town where, you know, I want to say $100,000 a year is like the 1%. Seriously. And, you know, the minimum wage is $7.25. Yeah, in my town, in my state, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. So no, I don't have to stay in LA or New York or Miami or these cities that I love. But, you know, I'm not going to give up the things that I do enjoy, the places I love being, only because I can't afford it or I can't do it. Well, okay, there's two ways to go about it. I can either find a way to afford it or, right, I can just go back to a place that's cheaper and maybe less stressful to survive in. And, you know, both are great options. It just comes down to what you want, right? As the listener, what do you want for your life? Where do you want to go next, right? And I'm not talking about thinking 10 years down the line. I'm just talking about like, how do you want to live your life? I have known since I was in college that I would love to be able to go to nice restaurants and drink nice cocktails and afford those meals without looking at the bill and worrying about if I can pay for it. Or I would love to be able to live in nice modern apartments with doormans and, you know, like not have to worry about being able to afford rent. Like, these are things that I already knew I liked. I love SoulCycle class. I love Pilates, right? I love these things, right? So there are two options to go about it. Either stop loving those things or find a way that you can incorporate it in your life, because that's what makes it worth it. If that requires making a certain income level and doing certain things to get there, especially in the early years of my career and my financial trajectory, so be it. So that was all for today's little episode on my story, my journey, and how I got my kickstart into my life as an entrepreneur in her 20s, living in Manhattan, New York. I hope you had a worthwhile takeaway from this episode. I hope this inspired you in some way, maybe got some wheels turning for you. If it did, it would mean the world to me. If you just DM'd me on Instagram, I love when you guys chat with me. You can DM me at Emily E. Duong or at What Fulfills You. I always respond, so please don't be a stranger. And it would mean even more the world if you rate and review the podcast if you haven't already, especially if you've been a long-time listener. It truly truly means a lot. You don't even have to write a review, just go give it 5 stars. I see the updates all the time, so it really means the world, and I don't often ask as much as I should, so the ratings do help you guys. And that is all I have for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in as always, and thank you for being on this journey of personal growth with me and having the desire to cultivate a fulfilling life for yourself. I will chat with you all in the next episode.